Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku is one for all mutated into a sentient being. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. Pain was the first reality. It was a white-hot, all-consuming sun that had risen inside Izuku Midoriya's body, eclipsing everything else. Thoughts were distant, flickering stars in its glare. Sounds were muffled, warped echoes from another universe. There was only the searing agony in his right arm, a symphony of shattered bone and torn sinew, and the echoing, phantom torment in his left hand, a testament to a battle fought and, in the end, lost. He was floating. Or maybe falling. He remembered the roar of the crowd, a beast with 10,000 mouths, and the shocking cold of Todoroki's eyes followed by the blistering heat of his fire. He remembered the desperate, frantic energy thrumming under his skin, one for all, a borrowed god's power in a paper-thin mortal shell. He had reached out, not just with his fists, but with his very soul, trying to pull his friend from a prison of ice and resentment, and he had succeeded. He remembered the look in Todoroki's eyes as his left side erupted in a magnificent, untamed inferno. It was a look of shock, of release, of terror and gratitude all at once. For that one, brilliant, blinding moment, Izuku had felt the pure, undiluted essence of being a hero. He had saved someone. Then came the impact. The collision of their power had felt less like a punch and more like the birth of a star between them. It had unmade the stadium floor, ripped the air from his lungs, and then, it had unmade him. The backlash was a merciless, physical reaping. It tore through his arm, shredding muscle, snapping the ulna and radius like dry twigs, and pulverizing the delicate bones in his hand into a gritty paste. The pain had been so absolute, so perfect in its intensity, that it had become a form of silence. Now, that silence was breaking apart, replaced by the throbbing, rhythmic cadence of his own suffering. He was on a stretcher. The sky above was a blurry, indifferent gray. Faces swam in and out of his vision, distorted and watery. He saw Uraraka's wide, terrified eyes, her mouth forming his name. He saw Ida's hand chopping the air, a gesture of frantic concern that was somehow both rigid and panicked. He saw a shadow fall over him, broad and immense, and knew it was All Might. The hero's face was a grim mask, the painted smile a stark, horrifying contrast to the anguish in his shadowed eyes. Young Midoriya! The voice was a low rumble, laced with a familiar concern that only made Izuku feel worse. He had failed him. He had won the battle for Todoroki's heart but lost the match, lost his chance to prove himself, and wrecked the sacred power All Might had entrusted to him. The guilt was a cold stone in his stomach, somehow heavier than the pain. The world dissolved into a series of jarring movements and muted sounds until he found himself in a place that was becoming distressingly familiar, the sterile white of Recovery Girl's infirmary. The sharp scent of antiseptic stung his nostrils, cutting through the fog. "Oh, you foolish, foolish boy!" a weary voice chirped. Recovery Girl stood over him, her silhouette backlit by the harsh fluorescent lights. Her usual stern affection was present, but it was buried under a thick layer of genuine exasperation. To this extent. "Honestly, what am I going to do with you? You treat your own body like it's a disposable resource." Izuku tried to apologize, to form words, but his throat was raw and his tongue felt thick and useless. A pained groan was all that escaped. She sighed, a sound like rustling leaves. "Save your strength, dear. You'll need it." He felt the gentle, but firm, pressure of her hands on his head, tilting it to the side. Then came the soft, puckering sensation of her lips on his cheek. Her quirk activated instantly. It was not a pleasant feeling. It wasn't a magical wave of a wand that made things better. It was an accelerant, a catalyst that forced his body to consume its own energy to perform miracles. He felt it as a violent, grinding process. The fragments of bone in his arm began to shift, grating against each other, as they sought to realign. Muscles, torn to ribbons, stitched themselves back together with searing, fiery threads. It was agony layered on top of agony, a necessary torment to reclaim his body from the brink. The sheer biological demand of the healing plunged him into a state of profound exhaustion, his consciousness thinning, stretching like taffy. He was sinking into a dark, quiet ocean. The pain was still there, but it was a distant pressure now, the crushing weight of the deep. He drifted, lost in the murky space between wakefulness and oblivion. Vague images surfaced and submerged, the shadowy figures of the vestiges he'd once seen, All Might's radiant smile, Todoroki's wall of fire. The noise of the world faded into a low, humming static. It was in that static, in that profound quiet of the soul, that a new sound emerged. It wasn't from the room. It wasn't a memory. It was a thought, perfectly formed, that was distinctly, utterly, not his own. Reckless. Utterly, catastrophically reckless. The voice was sharp, cold, and clear as cut glass. It resonated not in his ears, but directly in the center of his mind, like a bell struck in an empty cathedral. It carried an ancient weight, laced with an intellectual disdain that felt 1,000 years old. Izuku's drifting consciousness snagged on it. He tried to surface, to make sense of the intrusion. Recovery girl? He thought, his own mental voice a fuzzy, weak thing in comparison. But he'd seen her lips. She wasn't speaking. Besides, her voice was warm, even when scolding. This was something else. Something metallic and unforgiving. You were meant to showcase your potential, not shatter the vessel. Vessel? The word was jarring. It was clinical, detached. Like a scientist discussing a beaker. He tried to push the thought away, attributing it to the pain medication, the trauma, the sheer exhaustion of having his body rebuilt from the inside out. It was a hallucination. A stress-induced phantom. It had to be. He focused on the feeling of his bones knitting, the pain slowly receding into a dull, throbbing ache. Recovery girl gave a satisfied hum and pulled away. There. The worst of it is done, the bones are set, but the muscle and nerve damage will take time. And you've used up nearly all your stamina. You'll be asleep for hours. Don't even think about moving. She bustled around the room, putting things away. Izuku let out a long, shaky breath, the first one that didn't feel like inhaling glass. His arm was still a universe of pain, but it was whole. He was whole. The strange voice had faded with the peak of the agony. A hallucination. That's all it was. He was safe. He let his eyes drift shut, succumbing to the heavy pull of sleep. His mind replayed the fight again, but this time, he focused on his choices, his analysis. Todoroki relies on large-scale attacks. He's not used to close-quarters combat against someone who can withstand his initial assault. His ice is fast, but it has a wind-up. I saw it. I exploited it. I used my fingers, one by one, to create shockwaves that could counter his ice without taking me completely out of the fight. A foolish strategy from the start. The voice cut in again, sharper this time, slicing through his analysis with contemptuous ease. You traded an entire limb for a momentary advantage. A single, functional limb for a series of attacks that did negligible damage to your opponent and catastrophic damage to yourself. Izuku's eyes snapped open. The room was empty. Recovery girl must have stepped out. He was alone. But the voice was there, an undeniable presence in the architecture of his thoughts. It wasn't a sound, it was a pure concept, a meaning that simply appeared in his head. It wasn't about damage, Izuku argued back in the privacy of his own mind, his heart starting to beat a frantic rhythm against his ribs. It was about showing him he didn't have to be trapped. I had to get through to him. You speak of saving him, the voice retorted, its tone dripping with a cold, analytical logic that chilled him to the core. An admirable, if naive, sentiment. But what is the primary directive of a hero? Ninth? The word echoed in the silent chamber of his skull. Why did it call him that? The primary directive is to save people, he thought fiercely, trying to drown out the foreign presence with the strength of his own conviction. Incorrect. The primary directive is to win. Victory is the prerequisite for saving anyone. A defeated hero is a symbol of failure. A broken hero is a liability. By prioritizing your opponent's emotional state over your own tactical reality, you guaranteed your defeat. You won his heart, as you so sentimentally frame it, but you lost the match. You failed to advance. You failed to demonstrate viability. You failed. Each word was a precise, surgical stab. The voice wasn't just critiquing him. It was systematically dismantling his entire heroic ideology, the very foundation upon which he had built his dream. "Who are you?" he whispered aloud, the words scraping his throat. The sound was swallowed by the sterile silence of the infirmary. There was a pause. For a moment, he thought, he hoped, it was gone. Then, it returned, laced with something that sounded like a deep, weary sigh, a sound like grinding tectonic plates and fizzling electricity. "I am the one who pays the price for your recklessness. I am the power you so carelessly shatter." Izuku began to tremble, a deep, uncontrollable tremor that had nothing to do with the cold or the pain. This was no hallucination. A hallucination was a phantom, a trick of the mind. This felt real. It felt ancient and powerful, like an ocean tide moving within him. He could almost feel it, a subtle vibration deep in his bones, a hum that resonated with the faint green sparks that sometimes danced across his skin. "Your fight analysis was not incorrect," the voice continued, its tone shifting from condescending to purely academic. "You correctly identified that Todoroki was limiting himself. You understood the psychological source of his conflict. Your capacity for empathy is notable. But empathy is a tool, not a strategy. You allowed it to dictate your actions. You took his ice head on, a foolish display of endurance. A competent fighter would have evaded, repositioned, and used the environment. The arena was vast. You chose to make it a 10-foot cage. I had to stay close." Izuku's thoughts were a frantic shout in his mind. "I had to talk to him. You could have forced him into a position where he had no choice but to listen. Break his footing. Force him onto the defensive. Your obsession with direct, head-to-head confrontation is a reflection of All Might's influence. It is a style suited to an indestructible body. A style you do not possess. You are not him." The final 3 words hit him harder than Todoroki's ice. It was the deepest, most secret fear he held, the one that whispered to him in the dead of night when his confidence waned. "You're not All Might. You're not worthy." And this thing, this voice inside him, had plucked it from his soul and thrown it back in his face. "Stop it!" he croaked, squeezing his eyes shut. "Just stop." "I will not," the voice stated, its resolve absolute. "For 8 generations, I was a tool. A transfer of energy. A silent legacy. But the strain you have put upon me, the sheer, violent trauma of forcing 100% of my power through a vessel utterly unprepared for it, it has caused a coalescence. The echoes of the past have been given a voice. My voice. My voice." The words sunk in, planting roots of pure, unadulterated terror in Izuku's heart. My power. It was talking about one for all. His mind reeled. All Might had told him the history. A quirk passed from one person to the next, stockpiling power. A sacred torch. He never said it was alive. Had he known? Could he possibly have known? Or was this something new? Something Izuku himself had done. "You shattered yourself over and over," the voice confirmed, as if reading his frantic thoughts. "At the entrance exam. During the battle trial. And now this. Each time, you pushed me to a breaking point. Each time, you damaged the vessel. My structure is woven into your very being. 9th. The damage you do to yourself, you do to me. You have forced me to awaken, simply as a matter of self-preservation." "No!" Izuku breathed, his body going cold. That's impossible. A quirk can't. A quirk is a biological function. Your mind is a biological function. Why do you assume they cannot intersect? Your quirk created a second sun in that arena. You wield the power to level cities, and you find the concept of a unified consciousness within that power to be impossible? Your sense of scale is laughably skewed. The logic was inescapable, terrifying in its flawless precision. He had always treated one for all like an extension of himself, a muscle to be trained. But he wasn't its master. He was its host. Its vessel. He frantically tried to push it out of his mind, to build walls of denial around the voice. But it was like trying to hold back the tide with his bare hands. The voice was intertwined with the very power that defined him. It was everywhere. What do you want?" Izuku asked, his voice shaking. He opened his eyes and stared at the pristine white ceiling, feeling utterly, terrifyingly alone. There was a long silence. He could hear his own frantic heartbeat, a frantic bird trapped in the cage of his ribs. He could hear the faint hum of the infirmary equipment, and beneath it all, he could feel a low, resonant thrum of power inside him, waiting. Finally, the voice spoke again, its tone devoid of the earlier contempt, replaced by something heavier. A statement of fact. A declaration of terms. I want to survive. The one who came before you, Tashinori, he was the pinnacle. A perfect vessel, strong and resolute. He wielded me as I was meant to be wielded. But his time is ending. The embers of my power within him are fading. You, ninth, are the future. You are all that is left. The weight of that statement was crushing. He already knew, intellectually, that he was All Might's successor. But hearing it from the quirk itself, framed as a matter of cosmic survival, was different. The one who gave me to your predecessor, the voice continued, a hint of something softer, almost mournful, entering its tone, Nana Shimura, she died fighting him. The one who gave me to her, he died fighting him. The ones before, they lived in an age of war and chaos, hunted like animals. They fought and died to protect me, to keep this power out of his hands, the hands of all for one. The name landed like a coffin lid slamming shut. All Might had told him. The ultimate evil, the man who had crippled him, the antithesis to One for All's very existence. For 8 generations, this power has been a beacon of hope against the singular, suffocating darkness. 8 lives have been poured into me. 8 legacies form my consciousness. I am not merely a quirk, boy. I am a promise. I am a vow sealed in blood and sacrifice. And I will not allow that vow to be broken by a self-destructive child with a martyr complex. Izuku felt tears welling in his eyes, hot and shameful. They weren't tears of sadness or pain, but of sheer, overwhelming fear and frustration. Every dream he'd ever had was tied to this power. It was the miracle that had saved him from a quirkless life, the gift from his idol, the key to becoming a hero. And now, that miracle had a voice, and that voice was telling him he was a failure. A liability, a child. He couldn't accept it. He wouldn't. It's my quirk now, he choked out, a pathetic spark of defiance in the face of an inferno. All Might gave it to me. It's my body. My choice. He felt a surge of energy inside him, a flash of green lightning behind his eyes. It wasn't him. It was a flare of pure indignation from the voice. It is your body, yes? The vessel, the voice snapped, all traces of softness gone, replaced by an iron authority. But it is my existence. My power. You are the 9th custodian, a temporary guardian of a flame that has burned for over a century. You hold the torch, but you do not own the fire, and if you continue to handle it so recklessly, you will burn yourself to ash, and you will extinguish the flame along with you. That is not a choice I will allow you to make. The finality of its words left no room for argument. It wasn't a debate. It was a decree. Izuku lay there, trembling on the infirmary bed. The physical pain in his arm was a dull, distant ache now, completely overshadowed by the new, terrifying reality that had taken root in his mind. The static had cleared. The dreamlike fog had dissipated. And in its place was a terrible, stark clarity. He was Izuku Midoriya, student at UA High. He was the 9th holder of a legendary power, and he was the vessel for a sentient, ancient, and deeply unimpressed being that was now a permanent cohabitant in his soul. He felt a wave of dizziness wash over him as the last of his energy gave out. His body was finally succumbing to Recovery Girl's healing, forcing him toward sleep. As his consciousness faded, spiraling down into the waiting darkness, the voice delivered its final, chilling pronouncement, a promise that would haunt his waking moments. Sleep, 9th. Heal the vessel. Our work is just beginning. And your education starts now. The darkness took him, but it was not a peaceful sleep. It was a fall into a new kind of prison, one where he was no longer alone in his own head. The symbol of his hope had become his warden, and he was terrified. Denial is a warm, comfortable blanket. For 3 days, Izuku Midoriya wrapped himself in it so tightly he could barely breathe. The voice had been a dream. A nightmare. A particularly vivid hallucination brought on by a trifecta of traumatic injury, potent painkillers, and the crushing stress of the sports festival. That was the only logical explanation. Quirks didn't just wake up. They didn't talk. They didn't critique your life choices with the biting condescension of a tenured professor who secretly hated all his students. He repeated this mantra to himself as he sat in his bedroom, a space that was less a room and more a hallowed shrine to the symbol of peace. All Might beamed down at him from a dozen posters, his smile a sunburst of primary colors, his fists raised in triumphant victory. It was the face of heroism, the face of hope. It was a silent, powerful presence that had always comforted him. Now, it felt like an accusation. He was trying to focus on his English homework, a simple worksheet from President Mike. The words swam before his eyes. Translate the following sentences. Your penmanship is atrocious, a voice noted coolly in the back of his mind. The lack of discipline in your hand mirrors the lack of discipline in your mind. Every stroke is hesitant. Izuku flinched, his pencil scratching a dark, ugly line across the paper. He squeezed his eyes shut. Not real. Not real. Not real. It was just his own insecurity, his own self-criticism manifesting in a new, weird way. That's all it was. He was just being harder on himself after the festival. He took a deep breath and tried again, carefully forming the letters for the hero Save the Cat from the Tree. A meaningless platitude, the voice commented, its tone flat and unimpressed. The allocation of a hero with city-altering power to feline rescue represents a gross misallocation of strategic assets. The system is inefficient. Oh my God, shut up! Izuku muttered under his breath, rubbing his temples. The blanket of denial was starting to feel thin and frayed. For 3 days this had been his life. A constant, running commentary on every single thing he did. It was like having a ghost chained to his soul, and the ghost was a pedantic, overbearing life coach from a bygone era. At breakfast that morning, his mother had served him his favorite, katsudon, beaming with pride for how far he'd gotten in the festival, even as she fretted over his healing arm. You were so brave, Izuku, she'd said, her eyes shining. Izuku had smiled, a genuine, warm smile for her. Thanks, Mom. Your sodium intake is dangerously high, the voice had observed internally. This diet will lead to hypertension and reduced cardiovascular efficiency in the long term. The vessel requires optimal fuel, not emotional comfort food. During his commute to UA, as he reread his hero analysis for the future, Volume 13, the voice had been relentless. Obsessive, but you missed the obvious tactical flaws. You document abilities as if they exist in a vacuum. You fail to account for psychological warfare, resource management, or the political fallout of a hero's actions. You see the punch, not the chessboard. In class, as ectoplasm lectured on advanced mathematics, the voice acted as his own personal, unwanted tutor. Your derivation is sloppy. You skipped a logical step between lines 3 and 4. If this were the structural plan for a bridge, it would have collapsed. Precision is not optional. 9th. He had started calling it OFA in his head, a simple, sterile acronym to create some distance. To acknowledge it was to give it power, and he refused to do that. But ignoring it was becoming impossible. It was a constant, nagging presence, a backseat driver for his own life. It even critiqued his posture as he walked down the halls. You slouch. A hero's posture projects confidence and deters conflict before it begins. You project easy target. He felt like he was losing his mind. He couldn't tell anyone. How could he? Hi, All Might, sir. Thanks again for this super powerful quirk. Quick question, is it supposed to talk? And is it supposed to be a huge jerk? He'd be shipped off to a psychiatric ward before he could even finish the sentence. No. He had to handle this himself. He had to prove that the voice was wrong, that it was a figment of his imagination. And there was only one way to do that. He needed to feel One for All again. He needed to feel the familiar surge of power, the crackle of green energy, to prove that it was still his. That he was in control. After school, he bypassed his usual route home. He told Ida and Uraraka he had some extra training to catch up on, a plausible excuse that they accepted with encouraging smiles. He found what he was looking for in a secluded corner of UA's expansive campus, one of the smaller, unused training grounds, a simple patch of packed earth surrounded by a high concrete wall. It was deserted. Perfect. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat of hope and fear. His right arm was still in a sling, a constant reminder of the sports festival, but his left was fully healed. He could use that one, a single finger. A 5% smash. Just a little puff of air. That's all he needed. Just a little proof that he was still the one in the driver's seat. He took a deep breath, mimicking All Might's heroic stance as best he could with one arm. He closed his eyes, searching for that familiar wellspring of power within him. He reached for it, called to it, the way he always did. It's my power, he thought, a silent mantra of rebellion. My quirk. He felt it. A faint warmth, a familiar tingling deep in his core. It was there. A wave of relief so profound it almost buckled his knees. The voice was just a dream. It was all in his head. He focused the power, channeling it down his left arm, into the tip of his index finger. He could feel the energy gathering, the low hum that preceded the release. Come on! And then, nothing. The warmth vanished. The tingling sensation died, leaving a cold, empty void where the power should have been. It was like turning a key in an ignition only to hear a dull, pathetic click. The connection was dead. What? He tried again, more forcefully this time. He squeezed his eyes shut, pouring all of his focus, all of his will, into that single point. Work. A faint, sickly green spark sputtered at his fingertip for a barest fraction of a second, then fizzled out with a pathetic pft. Access denied? The voice was back. It was calm, unyielding, and absolute. It was the voice of a warden turning a key in a lock. No! Izuku whispered, his eyes flying open. He stared at his finger, as if it had betrayed him. No, you can't do that, he tried again. And again. And again. Each attempt was more desperate, more frantic than the last. He gritted his teeth, his body trembling with strain, trying to physically force the power out. He was met with the same result every time, a dead circuit, a locked door. Once he pushed so hard he felt a sharp, painful jolt in his shoulder, like a static shock amplified 1,000 times. A warning shot. The vessel is still compromised from the festival, the voice stated, its tone infuriatingly clinical. The energy reserves are depleted. Further reckless use is prohibited until a new operational protocol can be established and agreed upon. Protocol? Izuku finally screamed, the word ripping from his throat, raw and furious. He was yelling at the empty air, at the silent concrete walls. He didn't care how crazy he looked. The last thread of his denial had snapped. This was real. This thing was inside him, and it had hijacked his quirk. This isn't your decision to make, he yelled, his voice cracking. It's my quirk. My body. All Might gave it to me. He punched the packed earth with his good fist, a cloud of dust puffing up around his knuckles. The impact stung, but it was a good pain. A real pain. Something he could control. There was a long, heavy silence in his mind. He was panting, his chest heaving, his eyes burning with unshed tears of pure frustration. He had been given a miracle, and that miracle had turned into a cage. When the voice spoke again, the academic detachment was gone. In its place was an ancient, weary authority, a gravitas that felt as heavy as a mountain. Your body, it repeated, the words resonating with a profound, chilling power. You speak of it as if it is mere property. This body, ninth, is the ark. It is the last sanctuary for the culmination of 8 lives. 8 struggles. 8 deaths. Izuku froze, his fist still buried in the dirt. The man who passed this power to Toshinori was Heike Shinomori, the 4th user. He spent 18 years living in seclusion, a hermit in the forest, because he understood that my power shortens the lifespan of any user with a pre-existing quirk. He sacrificed his life, his connections, everything, simply to keep me safe until a quirkless vessel could be found. He didn't make that sacrifice so a boy could break their legacy in a school tournament. A cold dread trickled down Izuku's spine. He had never even heard that name before. The 2 before him, the 2nd and 3rd users, lived and died in an age of war, hunted by all for one when he was at his absolute zenith. They were vigilantes, soldiers. They saw horrors you cannot comprehend. They fought with a brutal efficiency you lack because hesitation meant death. They poured their desperate, violent hope into me. They didn't die in darkness so their power could be used for emotional theatrics. The voice was building, gaining momentum, each word steeped in the weight of history. Izuku felt small, insignificant, a child being scolded by ghosts. And Nana Shimura, the voice continued, and for the first time, a flicker of raw, undeniable emotion, a deep, aching sorrow, bled through its stoic facade. The seventh. All Might's master. She made a choice that shattered her own heart. She gave up her own son, left her family behind, to ensure that All for One could never use them as leverage against her, to ensure that I, this flame of hope, would survive. Do you have any concept of that sacrifice, boy? Do you understand the price she paid? Izuku couldn't breathe. He remembered All Might's story, the vague, painful way he spoke of his master. He had never imagined the reality of it. Giving up your own child. You shout that this is your quirk, the voice concluded, its tone now like cracking stone. You are a link in a chain forged in blood and pain and unbearable loss. You are the custodian of the hope that 8 people died to protect. It is a duty, not a possession. And your performance of that duty has, so far, been abysmal. Izuku collapsed, falling back from his knees to sit on the cold, hard ground. The fight went out of him, replaced by a profound, crushing shame. He wasn't just being lectured by his quirk, he was being judged by a jury of the dead. All the heroes who had carried this burden before him. He had thought of them as abstract figures, shadowy vestiges. But this voice, it was them. It was their will, their pain, their legacy. And he had treated it like a new toy. I didn't know, he whispered, the words feeling thin and pathetic. Of course you didn't, the voice said, the coldness returning. Tashinori gave you the power, but he failed to impress upon you the gravity of its history. He sees you through the lens of his own sentimentality. I do not have that failing. I see only the mission, to survive, to grow, and to finally end the shadow of All for One. A silence stretched between them, thick with the weight of revelation. Izuku stared at his hands, one healing in a sling, the other dirty from punching the ground. He had been so focused on his dream, on following in All Might's footsteps, that he never truly considered the footsteps that came before. Finally, he looked up at the empty sky. What are you? He asked, his voice quiet, stripped of all defiance. What should I call you? There was a pause, a moment of what felt like consideration. I am not simply one for all. That is the principle of my function, the name of the quirk itself. I am the result. I am the Gestalt consciousness formed from the fusion of the vestiges within the power core. I am the meeting point, the central hub of their wills. I am the nexus where 8 souls converge into one purpose. The voice paused, then delivered its name with a simple, profound finality. You may call me Nexus. Nexus. The name fit perfectly. It was technical, impersonal, yet hinted at a vast, interconnected complexity. Izuku took a shaky breath. The world had fundamentally tilted on its axis. He was no longer Izuku Midoriya, the kid who inherited a cool quirk. He was Izuku Midoriya, the 9th vessel for a sentient legacy named Nexus. His dream hadn't changed, but the path to it had just become infinitely more complicated. Okay. Nexus, he said, the name feeling strange and heavy on his tongue. What happens now? Now we establish the ground rules, Nexus stated, its tone shifting to that of a commander briefing a new recruit. The old way is over. Your self-directed, destructive methods are finished. Izuku listened, his entire body rigid with attention. He was no longer in a position to argue. He was in a position to learn, or be locked out of his own power forever. Rule 1, Nexus began. I control the flow and output of the power. You are the catalyst. You provide the will, the intent, the direction. I will act as the regulator, the processor. You will want to punch. I will determine how much power that punch requires and dispense it accordingly. There will be no more 100% smashes that destroy the vessel. Is that clear? Izuku swallowed hard. Why yes. Clear. It sounded less like a partnership, and more like he was being demoted to a passenger in his own body. Rule 2. All power usage will be calibrated. We will abandon this foolish all-or-nothing approach. The key is not overwhelming force, but sustainable, controlled output. The concept you have been fumbling toward, spreading the power throughout your entire body, is the correct path. But you have been trying to pour a river into a network of garden hoses. We will start with a single drop of water. A single drop? After wielding cataclysmic power at the festival, the idea was almost insulting. But he bit his tongue. He had no leverage here. Rule 3. Your training is no longer optional or self-directed. It will be constant. When you walk, when you write, when you breathe, you will be learning control. I have access to the muscle memory, combat experiences, and strategic knowledge of all 8 previous users. I will be your instructor. It will be grueling. You will not enjoy it. Izuku's mind swam. He was getting a personal tutor with the combined experience of 8 pro heroes, including All Might's own master. It was an opportunity beyond his wildest dreams, wrapped in the terrifying package of mental subjugation. I understand, he said. It was a surrender. A fragile, tense truce born not of mutual respect, but of his own desperation. Good, Nexus said. The word was clipped, devoid of praise. Then let us begin your actual education. Izuku slowly, painfully, got to his feet. He brushed the dirt from his pants, his body aching with a weariness that was more than just physical. He felt mentally and emotionally drained, as if he'd just run a marathon with his soul. Hold out your left hand, Nexus commanded. He obeyed, holding his good hand out in front of him, palm up. It trembled slightly. Close your eyes. Do not try to pull the power. Do not try to force it. That is the old way. That path leads only to broken bones. Instead, I want you to simply feel. I am a part of you now, ninth, a river of energy flowing through your core. I want you to feel for the current. Izuku did as he was told. He closed his eyes, shutting out the world, and turned his focus inward. For a moment, there was nothing but the frantic beating of his own heart. Then, he searched deeper, past the fear and the confusion. He reached for the place where he'd always felt one for all reside, and there it was. Not a raging inferno anymore, but a vast, calm, deep ocean of potential. It was immense, terrifying in its scale, but it was quiet. Patient. Waiting. There, Nexus's voice was a low hum, perfectly in sync with the energy he was sensing. You feel it. Now don't grab it. Just open the door. Give it permission. A single finger. Izuku focused on his index finger. He pictured a tiny, hollow channel running down his arm, ending at the tip. He wasn't pulling, wasn't forcing. He was just allowing. He whispered the word in his mind. Okay, and then he felt it. A minuscule, gossamer-thin thread of warmth trickled from the ocean of power in his chest. It flowed down his arm, effortless and smooth, like warm honey. It was a tiny, insignificant amount of energy, less than a spark, but it moved with a grace and precision he had never experienced. The thread reached his fingertip, and a soft, gentle green light bloomed there, no bigger than the head of a pin. It glowed with a steady, peaceful luminescence. There was no kickback. No strain. No recoil. And most importantly, there was no pain. Izuku's eyes shot open. He stared, mesmerized, at the tiny, perfect star of light on his finger. It was beautiful. It was controlled. It was a level of mastery he thought was years, if not decades, away. That, Nexus stated, a hint of something that might have been grim satisfaction in its tone, is 0.1%. That is your new beginning. That is control. The tiny light winked out. Izuku stood there in the fading afternoon light, his hands still outstretched, his mind reeling. He could access his power again. But the price was his autonomy. He was no longer just a boy trying to become a hero. He was a student, an apprentice, a vessel being taught how to properly contain the god that lived inside him. He looked around the empty training ground, a bitter smile touching his lips. He had come here looking for control, and in a way, he had found it. He just wasn't the one holding the reins anymore. This is not a partnership of equals. Ninth, Nexus's voice echoed in the quiet of his mind, a final ground rule being laid. Not yet. This is an apprenticeship. And your first lesson has just begun. The rhythmic clatter of the bullet train was a hypnotic, lulling sound, a steel heartbeat carrying Izuku Midoriya further and further from the familiar comfort of Muzurifu. He stared out the window, watching the urban sprawl of the city blur into rolling green hills and patchwork fields. Each click of the rails was a tick of the clock, counting down to the beginning of his internship, the first real step into the world of pro-heroes. For any other student, this would be a moment of pure, unadulterated excitement. For Izuku, it was an exercise in managed anxiety. He was not alone. Your posture is still suboptimal, a voice noted with clinical precision from the echo chamber of his mind. You are compressing your diaphragm, leading to shallower breathing. Sit upright. A hero must be able to maintain peak physical readiness even at rest. Izuku subtly straightened his spine, trying to make the movement look natural. He felt a phantom itch between his shoulder blades, the constant, unnerving sensation of being watched from the inside out. For the past week, life had been an unending boot camp run by a drill sergeant who lived in his soul. Nexus had been relentless. Every meal was a nutritional analysis, every step a lesson in posture and balance, every moment of silence an opportunity for a lecture on strategy or history. You are observing the landscape, Nexus continued, its voice a flat, analytical hum beneath the train's rhythm. What do you see? Trees? Izuku thought back, feeling a familiar spike of irritation. Fields? I'm on a train, what am I supposed to be seeing? Inexperienced, Nexus stated, not as an insult, but as a simple, damning fact. A strategist sees terrain. The hills provide elevated vantage points for reconnaissance. The dense forests offer cover for stealth or ambush. The open fields are kill zones, offering no protection from long-range attacks. The railroad itself is a primary artery for civilian evacuation or hostile troop movement. Never look at a location and see what it is. Look at it, and see what it can be used for. Izuku sighed, resting his forehead against the cool glass of the window. It was exhausting. It was also, he had to admit with a grudging reluctance, incredibly useful. His mind, already prone to analysis, was being sharpened to a razor's edge, forced to see the world not just through the eyes of a fan, but through the cold, calculating lens of a veteran soldier. Or rather, 8 of them. His destination was an address in Shibuya, Tokyo. The hero he had chosen for his internship was Gran Torino. All Might had arranged it, his voice tight with a strange mix of reverence and sheer terror when he spoke the name. He was the man who had trained the symbol of peace himself, a legendary figure whispered about in hero forums, but largely invisible to the public eye. Izuku was terrified and thrilled in equal measure. A logical choice, Nexus had conceded when he'd made his decision. Tashinori's master will possess intimate knowledge of my function, even in my previous, non-sentient state. His teaching methods, while described by the 7th as unorthodox, produced the single most effective user in my history. He may be able to accelerate your training. A pause. Or he may simply break you. The risk is acceptable. Izuku wasn't so sure about the acceptable risk part. He clutched the straps of his backpack, his knuckles white. Inside it was his hero costume, newly repaired after the sports festival. He hadn't dared to try activating one for all since that day at the training ground. Their sessions had been purely theoretical, mental exercises, and tiny, controlled bursts of 0.1% power to light up his fingertip. Nexus had been adamant, no unsupervised power usage until he was with a qualified instructor. Now, the time had come. He found the address easily enough. It wasn't a gleaming hero agency or a high-tech fortress. It was a dilapidated, 2-story building crammed between a laundromat and a noodle shop, looking like it had been forgotten by the city for several decades. The sign above the door was so faded as to be illegible. It looked condemned. The location is unassuming, low profile, Nexus observed. Excellent for avoiding unwanted attention. A sound tactical choice for a retired hero. Izuku took a deep breath and knocked. The sound echoed oddly, as if the building were hollow. No answer. He knocked again, louder. Still nothing. He cautiously tried the door. It swung open with a loud, protracted groan. The sight that greeted him was one of utter chaos. The interior was a disaster zone of piled-up junk, overflowing trash bags, and empty food containers. The air was thick with the smell of stale food and dust, and in the middle of it all, lying face down in a pool of what looked disturbingly like blood, was a tiny, wizened old man in a yellow jumpsuit and a domino mask. Izuku's heart leaped into his throat. He's dead! He shrieked, dropping his bag and rushing forward. Negative, Nexus stated calmly. There is no scent of blood. The liquid is viscous and smells of tomato and Worcestershire sauce. It is ketchup. He is breathing. Respiration is slow, consistent with a state of deep sleep. This is a pathetic display. Before Izuku could fully process this, the corpse shot up from the floor with a speed that defied his age. In a blur of yellow, the old man, Gran Torino, zipped past him, ricocheted off a wall, and came to a halt behind him, his cape fluttering. Who are you? The old hero rasped, his voice gravelly. Izuku spun around, stammering. I am Izuku Midoriya, from Yue High. I'm the student who's come here for my internship. Gran Torino stared at him, his eyes, visible behind the mask, sharp and piercing. He circled Izuku like a vulture. All Might's boy, huh? You look plain. Scrawny. Are you really the one who inherited One for All? The bluntness of the question stole Izuku's breath. How did you? I taught him, you dunce. Of course I know, he snapped. I heard you broke yourself all to pieces at the festival. A real chip off the old blockhead. He was the same. All power, no finesse. So, show me. Let's see what you can do. Before Izuku could even protest, Gran Torino's feet erupted with jets of compressed air. He shot around the room like a pinball, a yellow comet careening off the walls, ceiling, and floor. The velocity was staggering. Izuku's eyes could barely track him. He uses his quirk, Jet, for high-speed propulsion, Nexus analyzed instantly. The bursts are short and precise, allowing for rapid changes in trajectory. He is not just fast, he is unpredictable. His movement is designed to disorient and overwhelm. Do not track his body, track the source of the propulsion. Watch his feet. Izuku tried, but it was impossible. One moment Gran Torino was a blur on the ceiling, the next he was right in front of him, his foot connecting solidly with Izuku's back. The blow wasn't powerful enough to injure, but it sent him stumbling forward, face first into a pile of dusty magazines. Too slow! Gran Torino cackled. You're just standing there. Are you a hero or a statue? Izuku pushed himself up, coughing. I need to put on my costume, he protested. A real crisis won't wait for you to change your pants. The old hero shot back, already rocketing around the room again. Fight me, Izuku's mind raced. He's right. I have to react. He braced himself, trying to anticipate the next attack. He saw a yellow blur coming from his left. He ducked, but Gran Torino had already changed course, appearing on his right and delivering a light but firm kick to his side. Your reaction time is abysmal. He's baiting you. Nexus's voice was a sharp staccato in his head. He's feinting left to draw your attention, then striking from the right. It's a basic misdirection tactic. Do not fall for it. Dodge left. No, your other left, you emotional mess. He's testing your adaptability. The internal and external attacks were overwhelming. Izuku felt like a mouse being toyed with by two different cats at the same time. One was physically batting him around the room, the other was mentally dissecting his every failure. Frustration boiled over. He needed to fight back. He needed to show he wasn't useless. The old way, the stupid way, was all he could think of. I need more power. He tried to draw on One for All, to summon a 5% smash, something, anything to create some space. Access denied. Nexus's voice was like a steel door slamming shut in his mind. Protocol dictates no unauthorized high-output bursts. But he's attacking me! Izuku yelled, the words coming out as a frantic gasp as he dodged another flyby kick. This is a controlled training exercise, not a battle for survival. Your emotional state is compromising your judgment. Calm your mind. Use what you have been permitted. Izuku gritted his teeth. What I've been permitted? You mean nothing? He held up his hand, focusing, pleading. Just a little, A pathetic green spark fizzled at his fingertip. Gran Torino zipped to a halt in front of him, landing softly. He peered at Izuku's hand. What was that? A firefly? He asked, his tone mocking. Is that the power that leveled half the sports festival arena? I'm disappointed, Tashinori. You picked a broken one. The words stung, igniting a fire of shame and determination in Izuku's chest. He looked at the old hero, then at his own trembling hands. He was failing. Nexus was right. Gran Torino was right. He was weak, he was fumbling. I don't know how to control it, Izuku admitted, his voice small. When I use it, I break myself. I've been trying to spread it through my whole body, like All Might does, but I can't. Gran Torino was silent for a long moment, stroking his chin. His sharp eyes scanned Izuku from head to toe. So you see the goal, but you can't find the road. You're thinking of one for all as a special move, a firecracker you set off. That's not what it is. It's not something you turn on and off. It has to be a part of you. Constant. Like breathing. He picked up a plate from a nearby pile of trash. On it was a half-eaten, cold, soggy piece of taiyaki. Imagine this is you, he said, holding up the fish-shaped cake. Right now you're putting all the power, all the filling in one spot. Pop! It explodes. What you need to do is spread that filling evenly through the whole thing. From head to tail, Izuku stared at the taiyaki. He understood the metaphor perfectly. It was the same conclusion he and Nexus had come to. But understanding and executing were two different worlds. The analogy is crude, but functionally accurate, Nexus stated. The problem is not your understanding, Ninth. It is your execution. You are trying to mentally will the power into place. You are thinking about it too hard. I know! Izuku said aloud, then clamped his mouth shut, realizing he'd spoken to Nexus in front of Gran Torino. The old hero raised an eyebrow. You know, do you? Then do it! He challenged. Izuku closed his eyes. He tried to visualize it. The ocean of power in his chest. He imagined tiny rivers flowing out from it, down his arms, his legs, through his torso. But the moment he tried to guide the flow, it felt wrong. It was like trying to sketch a perfect circle with a trembling hand. The lines of power were jagged, unstable. He could feel them snagging, threatening to burst. No, 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 he thought frantically. Gentle. Even flow. You are still trying to command it. Nexus's voice was laced with a frustration that mirrored his own. You are treating me like a stubborn mule to be led. I am not an external force you must wrangle. Ninth. I am woven into the fabric of your being. Stop trying to push me and simply allow me to flow. I'm trying, he whispered, sweat beading on his forehead. He could feel the power bubbling, volatile and unstable. A surge of it, far more than 0.1%, rushed into his right arm, the one still healing. A sharp, warning pain lanced through his bicep. He cut the connection instantly, gasping. He was failing. He couldn't do it. The gap between what he needed to do and what he was capable of felt like a chasm. Gran Torino sighed, a sound of profound disappointment. I thought you'd be further along. Tashinori really didn't teach you anything, did he? Maybe this was a mistake. That was it. That was the final straw. The disappointment from his mentor's own teacher. The constant, grating criticism from Nexus. His own pathetic inability. Something inside Izuku snapped. It wasn't anger, but a profound, desperate surrender. I can't do it, he thought, the admission a wave of defeat washing over him. He opened his eyes, looking at Nexus in the abstract space of his mind. I can't. You said you could regulate the flow. You said you could guide it. Then do it. Show me how. There was a moment of absolute stillness in his mind. The usual hum of Nexus's analytical thoughts ceased. For a terrifying second, he thought he had been met with silence. Then, a new sensation. A request born of desperation rather than logic. Nexus's voice was a low, dangerous rumble. But it is a request nonetheless. You are finally admitting you require my direct intervention. Very well, cede control. Stop fighting me. Stop trying to steer. Let go of the reins completely. I will guide the flow. It was the same bargain from the training ground. Trust me. Let go. This time, Izuku didn't hesitate. He was out of options. He closed his eyes, took a shaky breath, and in the quiet of his soul, he let go. He relinquished his desperate, clumsy grip on the power of one for all. The result was instantaneous and utterly overwhelming. It wasn't a surge or a rush. It was a feeling of cool, clean water suddenly flowing through every vein in his body. He felt Nexus, not as a voice, but as a tangible presence, reach into him. It felt invasive, alien, a master puppeteer sliding its hands into his nerves. Nexus wasn't just guiding the power, it was actively mapping his circulatory system, his nervous system, his entire biological network. A thread of pure energy, precisely calibrated to a level he couldn't even comprehend. Maybe 3%, maybe 4%, was drawn from the core reservoir. But instead of him clumsily shoving it down a single limb, Nexus expertly partitioned it. It split the energy into 1,000 microscopic streams, sending them flowing through his body with an impossible, breathtaking precision. He felt the power saturate his muscles, not with burning heat, but with a vibrant, humming energy. It settled into the dense muscles of his legs, coiled in his core, and hummed in the fibers of his arms. Red veins of crackling energy spiderwebbed across his skin, but they weren't the angry, jagged lines of a power about to break free. They were intricate, ordered patterns, a perfect circulatory system of light, and there was no pain. None. For the first time, he felt the true potential of One for All, not as a weapon of self-destruction, but as a source of limitless vitality. His eyes snapped open. The world seemed sharper, brighter. He could feel the subtle shifts in air pressure in the room. He could feel the thrum of his own heart, steady and strong. He felt powerful. Whole. This, Nexus's voice was a deep, resonant hum, now a part of the energy flowing through him, is One for All, full cowling. This is the baseline state from which all heroes should operate. This is control. Gran Torino, who had been watching his student have what appeared to be a silent mental breakdown, saw the change instantly. The boy who had been slumped in defeat was now standing tall, radiating a quiet, contained energy. Faint green sparks danced around him, and thin, glowing red lines traced their way across his body. He looked up, and his eyes, now shining with a faint emerald light, held a new, startling focus. "Hope!" the old hero murmured, a slow grin spreading across his face. "So you finally found the switch," and then he was moving, a yellow blur aiming straight for Izuku's center mass. Before, Izuku would have panicked. He would have braced for impact or tried a clumsy, desperate punch. Now, something else happened. His will screamed, "Dodge!" Nexus responded instantly, its voice a rapid-fire burst of data in his mind. Threat incoming. Vector, direct frontal assault. Solution, lateral evasion. Increasing power output to legs to 4.8%. Shift weight to left foot. Push. Izuku didn't have to think. He just did. His body moved with a grace and speed that felt utterly alien to him. He shot to the side, the motion fluid and explosive. Gran Torino's attack missed by inches, the rush of air ruffling his hair. Izuku landed silently, already coiled, ready for the next move. He wasn't just faster, he was more efficient. His own instincts were being augmented by centuries of combined combat experience. Gran Torino ricocheted off the far wall, his grin widening. "There you are! Now we're talking!" He came again, this time from above, a diving kick aimed at Izuku's head. Will, block and counter. Nexus, inefficient. A block will sacrifice momentum. Evade and reposition to his blind spot. Drop and roll. Use the spin to build kinetic energy for a counter thrust. Izuku's body obeyed before his conscious mind could even process the command. He dropped, tucking into a roll as Gran Torino's foot sailed over his head. He came out of the roll on one knee, already facing the old hero's landing spot. The old hero was genuinely surprised. The boy wasn't just reacting anymore, he was thinking 3 steps ahead. Or, more accurately, something was. Gran Torino's eyes narrowed. The kid's muttering had stopped, but his focus was intense, distant, as if he were listening to an earpiece no one could see. His movements were too clean, too refined for a novice who had just figured out how to turn the power on. This wasn't the clumsy flailing of Tashinori's youth. This was something else entirely. "Not bad, kid!" Gran Torino shouted, zipping around the room again, his movements becoming more erratic, faster. "But you're still just dodging! A hero has to attack! You have to land a hit!" Izuku pushed himself to his feet, the green energy of full cowling humming around him. He felt a surge of exhilaration, a giddy sense of power he had never known. He could do this. No, they could do this. The distinction was becoming blurry, and for now, he didn't care. He's right, Izuku thought, his will now a sharp, focus point. We need to land a hit. We need to prove this works. Affirmative, Nexus responded. His movement is based on ricocheting off solid surfaces. He telegraphs his trajectory nanoseconds before each burst. The key is not to intercept him mid-flight, but to predict his landing point and strike as he touches down, in the brief moment he is grounded. Gran Torino shot off the ceiling, aiming for the floor right in front of Izuku. It was a feint, designed to make Izuku jump back, leaving him open for an attack from below. Izuku's will, don't fall for it. Jump over him. Nexus's cold logic, correct. Optimal counter is a vertical leap. Calculating trajectory and required thrust. Output to legs, 5%. Execute. Izuku bent his knees and leaped. He didn't just jump, he exploded upwards. The floor beneath his feet cracked as he shot into the air, sailing clean over Gran Torino's head. For a glorious, suspended moment, he was airborne, looking down at his teacher. He saw it. The flicker of surprise in the old hero's eyes. Gran Torino landed, immediately firing his jets to bounce off the wall behind him. But for that split second, he had been stationary. His momentum had been broken. Now! The thought was a unified scream from both Izuku and Nexus. Izuku twisted in midair. Nexus flooded his right leg with a perfectly controlled burst of power. Airborne strike. Use rotational force. Target, his back. Output 5%. He swung his leg around, aiming a kick at the yellow blur. Gran Torino was fast, impossibly fast. He twisted away, but not quite fast enough. The toe of Izuku's iron-soled boot clipped his cape, tearing a small shred of fabric from it. It wasn't a direct hit, but it was contact. Izuku landed, stumbling slightly as the power receded under Nexus's precise control. He was breathing heavily, his body thrumming with adrenaline. The room was silent except for his own ragged breaths. Gran Torino came to a stop in the center of the room. He reached back, feeling the torn edge of his cape. He looked at the tiny scrap of yellow fabric on the floor, then back at Izuku. The mocking grin was gone. In its place was a look of profound, calculating seriousness. "Well, I'll be," he breathed, a plume of steam hissing from his boot jets. "You actually did it." He walked over to Izuku, his eyes boring into him. "Your movements, they're not yours. Not entirely. You're too precise. Too efficient. It's like watching an old recording of Nana, but with Tashinori's power, and you're muttering, it's gone quiet. Who are you listening to, kid?" Izuku's blood ran cold. He had been so caught up in the fight, in the feeling of shared power, he hadn't considered how it would look from the outside. He opened his mouth to deny it, to come up with a lie, but his mind was blank. Nexus's voice was a low, cautionary whisper. "Do not reveal my existence. The strategic implications are too great. The fewer who know, the smaller the attack surface for our enemy. Deflect. Attribute it to instinct." "I don't know what you mean," Izuku stammered, his eyes wide and pleadingly innocent. I finally understood what you meant. About making it a part of me. It just clicked." Gran Torino stared at him for a long, uncomfortable moment. He knew the boy was lying. He didn't know the nature of the lie, but he could smell the evasion. He had trained one user of One for All and been a close comrade to another. He knew the quirk. It was a wild, untamed beast. It did not lend itself to this level of instantaneous, savant-like control. Something was different about this inheritor. Fundamentally different. But he decided, for now, to let it go. Pushing would only make the boy clam up. All right, kid, he said, turning away. If you say so. But we're not done. He pointed a thumb at the mess around them. Your first real task. Clean this pigsty. And get that taiyaki out of the microwave. It's time for a real meal. Izuku stared, bewildered, as the legendary hero began rummaging through a pile of laundry. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion, but also a giddy, trembling excitement. He had done it. They had done it. He had landed a hit, or at least part of a hit, on Gran Torino. He had unlocked full cowling. He was no longer a boy with a broken finger. He was a hero with a foundation. He looked down at his hands. The relationship with the being inside him had changed again. It wasn't master and servant anymore. It was something new. Something symbiotic and strange. He provided the heart, the heroic impulse, the desperate, unyielding will to save people. Nexus provided the brain, the cold technique, the centuries of experience needed to make that will a reality. A new dynamic had been forged in the crucible of this dusty, chaotic room. Izuku was the hero. And Nexus was the backseat driver who would make damn sure he didn't crash. Your stance is wavering again, Nexus commented dryly in his mind. The adrenaline is fading. Do not allow your form to degrade. And find a broom. This level of filth is a biological hazard to the vessel. Izuku sighed, but for the first time, he smiled. A real, tired, genuine smile. Right. He whispered to himself. One step at a time. His internship had just begun, and he had a feeling it was going to be the strangest, hardest, and most important week of his life. The city of Hosa at night was a dazzling, chaotic symphony of light and sound. Neon signs painted the slick streets in hues of electric blue and feverish pink, reflecting off the windows of sleek, modern skyscrapers that clawed at the starry sky. The air thrummed with the energy of a million lives, a constant, vibrant hum of traffic and chatter. It was the beating heart of a society built around heroes, a place where the extraordinary was just another part of the evening commute. For Izuku, perched on a rooftop alongside Gran Torino, it was breathtaking. His internship had been a whirlwind of grueling, monotonous, and utterly transformative training. The past few days had been a cycle of cleaning, cooking, and combat. Gran Torino was a relentless taskmaster, his methods as erratic as his movements. He'd have Izuku spend hours just practicing holding full cowling at a stable 5%, critiquing every flicker of the emerald energy, every slight tremor in his muscles. Then, without warning, he'd launch an all-out assault, forcing Izuku and Nexus into a frantic, high-speed dance of evasion and counterattack. The synergy between them was growing stronger, less like a man with a ghost in his head and more like two pilots sharing a single cockpit. Izuku's will was the ignition, Nexus was the guidance system. Izuku would feel the heroic impulse, protect, save, intervene, and Nexus would translate that raw emotion into brutally efficient tactical reality. Shift your weight. He's telegraphing a low sweep. That patrol car below offers partial cover. The fire hydrant is a potential environmental weapon. Always be aware of your surroundings. 9th. A hero who only sees their opponent is a hero who will be defeated by something they never saw coming. The constant use of 9th was a reminder of his place in the legacy, a weight that kept his newfound power from inflating his ego. He was a link in a chain, and Nexus never let him forget it. Tonight was their first real patrol. Gran Torino wanted to see how Izuku handled a live environment, how he maintained his focus amidst the sensory overload of a bustling metropolis. They were leaping from rooftop to rooftop, a silent, flickering dance under the moonlight. The feeling of full cowling was becoming second nature, a low thrum of power that felt as natural as his own heartbeat. Keep your eyes open, kid, Gran Torino rasped, his cape snapping in the wind. A real patrol isn't about looking for trouble. It's about sensing it before it happens. It's a feeling, a disturbance in the city's rhythm. Izuku nodded, his eyes scanning the streets below. He saw couples walking hand in hand, salarymen rushing for the last train, the vibrant, ordinary tapestry of life. It was peaceful. Almost too peaceful. The old man is correct, Nexus commented, its voice a calm counterpoint to the city's noise. Large-scale hostile actions are often preceded by subtle anomalies. Unusually light traffic in a major thoroughfare. A sudden drop in pedestrian presence. The absence of ambient sound. Learn the rhythm, and you will recognize when it skips a beat. Suddenly, a deafening explosion ripped through the city's symphony, turning it into a discordant scream. A plume of black smoke and angry orange fire billowed into the sky from several blocks away, near the central train station. Screams followed, sharp and terrified, cutting through the night. The city's rhythm hadn't just skipped a beat, its heart had just been ripped out. There it is, Gran Torino said, his voice grim. He was already moving, his jets firing as he shot towards the chaos. Stay close, kid! Don't engage without my signal! Izuku's heart hammered against his ribs. This was it. A real villain attack. His every instinct screamed at him to rush in, to find the source of the screams and stop it. He followed Gran Torino, his legs pumping, the 5% full cowling making the multi-story leaps feel effortless. As they got closer, the scene devolved into pure bedlam. The street near the station was a war zone. Fires raged from overturned cars. Panicked civilians scrambled for safety, their faces masks of terror, and in the middle of it all were the monsters. They were grotesque parodies of humanity. One had multiple arms, its skin a sickly, mottled gray. Another was a winged beast with dead, glassy eyes. Noma. Izuku recognized them instantly from the USJ incident. His blood ran cold. Multiple hostiles. Nexus's analysis was instantaneous and ice cold. At least 3 confirmed. Their movements are erratic but destructive. They are not acting with discernible strategy. They are tools of chaos, meant to sow terror and draw hero attention. Noma! Izuku shouted to Gran Torino as they landed on a rooftop overlooking the carnage. Just like at the USJ. This has to be the League of Villains. I see them. Gran Torino grunted, his eyes narrowed. They're spreading out, maximizing damage. We need to contain them. You take the one on the left. The multi-armed one. I'll handle the flyer. Remember your training, control, precision. Don't get drawn into a brawl. Izuku's will screamed in agreement. Save the civilians. Stop the monster. But Nexus had a different, colder priority. Its voice was sharp, cutting through Izuku's adrenaline-fueled haze. Negative. This is a diversionary tactic. Izuku faltered, his legs already tense to leap. What? What are you talking about? People are in danger. Precisely, Nexus retorted. This is a classic look-here maneuver. These creatures, while dangerous, are pawns. They are a loud, messy distraction designed to pull heroes like us into predictable containment patterns. Our true enemy, the one who created them, the one who commands them, is likely operating elsewhere under the cover of this chaos. Wasting energy on these pawns is strategically unsound. The cold, ruthless logic of it was jarring. Izuku looked down at a terrified family huddling behind a burning bus, the multi-armed Noma shambling towards them. He saw the sheer terror in a little girl's eyes. I don't care if it's a trap. Izuku shot back in the privacy of his own mind, his defiance a fiery roar. They need help. We have to save them. That's what heroes do. He didn't wait for a reply. He ignored the cold protest from his own quirk. He launched himself off the roof, a green blur of motion, aiming directly for the Noma. Reckless, Nexus's voice was a low, frustrated growl. You are allowing sentiment to override strategy again. You are falling into the enemy's exact plan. The vessel is at risk for a non-critical objective. Izuku landed between the Nomu and the family, skidding to a halt on the asphalt. Get out of here! Run! He yelled at them, not daring to look back. The family scrambled away, their sobs and thank yous lost in the noise. The Nomu let out a guttural roar and swiped at him with 3 of its powerful arms. Izuku ducked and weaved, the movements now instinctive. The synergy was still there. Nexus was too fundamentally ingrained to simply switch off, but there was a new, tense undercurrent to it. It was like driving a car while the onboard computer was screaming at you to turn around. Its attack patterns are clumsy. Nexus provided the data, begrudgingly. It telegraphs its movements. Wide, sweeping attacks with significant recovery time. Its strength is its primary asset. Do not engage it head-on. Use your speed. Target its joints. Izuku followed the advice, his body a blur of green light as he dodged and repositioned. He wasn't just a boy anymore. He was a wielder of one for all. He shot forward, delivering a sharp, 5% kick to the creature's knee. The joint buckled with a sickening crunch. The Nomu roared in pain and surprise. It worked. He could do this. He could win. He was so focused on the fight, on the dance of combat, that he almost missed it. A faint vibration from the phone in his pocket. It buzzed again. And again. A frantic, insistent pattern. His heart sank. It had to be an emergency. Who would be trying to contact him now? He leaped back, putting distance between himself and the limping Nomu. He fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking. He flipped it open. A single message, a location pin. From Ida. The pin was just a few blocks away, in a dark, narrow alleyway. Izuku's blood turned to ice. He remembered Ida's face after the sports festival, the cold, obsessive fire in his eyes when he spoke of his brother, Ingenium, who had been crippled by the hero killer, Stain. Ida had chosen his internship in Hosa for a reason. Vengeance. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The Nomu attack, it was a cover. Stain was here. And Ida, foolish, brave, grief-stricken Ida, had found him. Ida! Izuku whispered, his voice trembling. He looked from the Nomu, which was now being engaged by several other pro-heroes arriving on the scene, to the location pin on his phone. He had to go. His friend was in mortal danger. Absolutely not. Nexus's voice was no longer just cold or frustrated. It was absolute, an iron wall slamming down in his mind. This is precisely what I warned you about. The primary threat was never the Noma. It is him, the hero killer. But your friend's choice is not our concern. He's my friend. Izuku's thoughts were a desperate scream. He's going to get himself killed. I have to help him. Vengeance is an anchor. 9th, Nexus's voice took on a deeper, more somber tone. It felt like it was channeling the wisdom of the dead directly into his skull. It drowns heroes. It poisons the soul and clouds judgment. The second and third users saw it consume countless allies in their war. Nana Shimura saw it drive heroes to ruin. Your friend has chosen a path of self-destruction. We will not die for his foolish pride. The logic was flawless. It was also completely, utterly unacceptable. Izuku pictured Ida's earnest, serious face, his rigid adherence to the rules, his unwavering loyalty. He pictured him lying bleeding in an alley, his dream of honoring his brother turning into a nightmare. No, Izuku said aloud, shaking his head. A hero saves people. That's the first rule. That's the only rule that matters. He turned his back on the main battle, on the Nomu, on Gran Torino's orders. He broke into a sprint, his full calling-powered legs eating up the pavement, as he raced towards the location pin. You are defying a direct strategic imperative. Nexus's voice raged in his mind, a storm of fury and logic. You are abandoning a secure position to engage an unknown, high-level threat for purely emotional reasons. This is insubordination. This is suicide. Then so be it. Izuku thought back, his resolve hardening into a diamond point of certainty. If I let my friend die when I could have helped him, then I'm not a hero. And if I'm not a hero, then this power means nothing. It was a declaration of war against the very being that gave him his strength. He was choosing his own ideology, his own definition of heroism, over the cold, calculated pragmatism of the 8 ghosts in his machine. As he ran, the city became a blur of neon and shadow. He could feel Nexus's fury, a cold, humming pressure in his mind. It wasn't just disagreeing with him. It was actively trying to impede him. The flow of power to his legs felt sluggish, heavier, as if he were running through water. You are deliberately restricting the power. Izuku realized, his breath catching in his throat. I will not contribute to the vessel's destruction, Nexus stated, its voice like ice. If you insist on this suicidal course of action, you will do it with the bare minimum of my assistance. You can't do this! He gasped, pushing harder, his own muscles straining against the artificial resistance. I can and I will. I am the regulator. My primary function is to preserve this power. Your life is secondary to that mission. The sheer ruthlessness of the statement staggered him. For a moment, his resolve wavered. Was this thing a partner or a parasite? A guardian or a jailer? He didn't have time to ponder it. He skidded around a corner, into the dark, narrow alley from the location pin. The scene that greeted him would be burned into his memory forever. The pro-hero native was slumped against the wall, bleeding from a dozen wounds. Ida was on the ground, his silver armor slashed and pierced, a small pool of blood spreading beneath him, and standing over them both was the hero killer. Stain was even more terrifying in person than in the grainy news reports. He was tall and gaunt, wrapped in ragged scraps of clothing and stained bandages. His eyes, visible through the slits in his makeshift mask, held a wild, fervent gleam, the eyes of a true believer. He held a bloody katana in one hand, its edge glinting in the dim light from the street. But it was his presence, his aura, that was most terrifying. It was an overwhelming wave of pure, unadulterated bloodlust and conviction. Another fake arrives. Stain rasped, his voice a dry rustle of dead leaves. He licked the blood from a long, serrated knife in his other hand. This city is infested with them tonight. You all flock to the promise of fame and fortune, like moths to a flame that will burn you to ash. Ida! Izuku screamed, his fear momentarily eclipsed by rage. Ida turned his head, his face pale and streaked with tears and grime. Midoriya, why are you here? Run, you can't, he's too strong. A true hero doesn't run, Stain said, turning his fanatical gaze on Izuku. But you don't have the eyes of a hero. You have the eyes of a frightened child playing dress-up. Izuku clenched his fists, full cowling still active, though it felt weaker, strained. He was ready to launch himself forward, to do anything. But then, the atmosphere in his mind shifted completely. Nexus's cold fury, its logical protests, vanished. They were replaced by something far, far scarier. A deep, primal, and utterly lethal silence. The kind of silence a predator makes right before it strikes. For the first time since it had awoken, Nexus wasn't just analyzing or critiquing. It was focusing. All the combined experience of the 8 previous users, the soldiers, the survivors, the heroes who had fought in wars and stared down all for one himself, all of it was being brought to bear on the single figure standing before them. It was no longer an argument about strategy. It was a threat assessment. And the verdict was absolute. Nexus's voice returned, but it was completely changed. All traces of academic detachment were gone. It was a low, deadly whisper that vibrated with ancient, barely contained violence. It was the voice of the second and third users, the voice of warriors who knew what it was to kill, or be killed. This one is different. The words sent a shiver down Izuku's spine that had nothing to do with fear of Stain. He is not a thug. He is not a monster. He is not a pawn. He is a predator. His ideology is twisted, but his conviction is pure. He is a symptom of the disease, a necessary evil that has arisen from the failures of this hero's society. Nexus paused, its focus absolute. Izuku could feel its attention like a physical weight, a targeting laser painting Stain from head to toe. He is also a master of his craft. Look at his stance. Perfect balance. His grip on the blade is flawless. His eyes, they see everything. Your friend was defeated before the first blow was even struck. The cold analysis was back, but now it was laced with a chilling, predatory respect. Your sentimental, reckless charge has led us here. You have ignored my counsel and jeopardized the mission. But the situation has changed. This is no longer a matter of choice. This is a matter of survival. The sluggishness in Izuku's limbs vanished. The cold resistance from Nexus disappeared, replaced by a surge of perfectly regulated, ice-cold power. The 5% he was wielding felt denser, sharper, more potent. It was Nexus, removing the governor, dedicating its full processing power to the fight. Listen to me now, Ninth, and listen carefully, the voice was a blade in his mind. There is no room for error. There is no room for hesitation. There is no room for your self-sacrificing morality plays. He will exploit any weakness, any opening. He fights to kill. And if we are to survive, we must fight to win. Nexus's final command was not a suggestion or a piece of advice. It was a direct, absolute order from a legacy of warriors to its newest soldier, standing on the precipice of his first true life-or-death battle. Do not show mercy. Do not hold back. End this. Now. The alley was a pressure cooker, the air thick with the metallic tang of blood and the suffocating weight of Stain's conviction. Time seemed to warp, stretching and compressing around the three figures. For Izuku, the world narrowed to the space between himself and the hero killer. The distant sirens, the screams from the main street, the very thrum of the city faded into a muted backdrop. There was only the glint of a bloody katana and the voice in his head, now humming with a deadly, focused harmony. He is assessing you, Ninth. Do not make the first move. Let him reveal his strategy. Izuku's heart was a frantic drum, but his body, guided by the cold current of Nexus, felt preternaturally calm. The 5% full cowling was a second skin of livewire energy, crackling around him. He shifted his weight onto the balls of his feet, his posture a perfect mirror of the combat stances Nexus had been drilling into his muscle memory for weeks. Stain's head tilted, a bird-like gesture of curiosity. You stand differently than the others, he rasped, his voice a dry whisper that scraped against the silence. The fear is there, I can taste it, but there's something else. A focus. You are not just a child in a costume. He took a step forward, his movements fluid and silent, like a shadow detaching itself from the wall. Let's see if that focus is worth anything. He didn't charge. He threw a knife. The movement was a blur, an almost casual flick of his wrist. The blade flew through the air, end over end, aimed directly at Izuku's face. Izuku's instinct screamed, catch it. Or dodge. Nexus was faster. Threat analysis, projectile. Velocity high. Trajectory, linear. Optimal response, deflection, not evasion. Evasion cedes ground. Deflection maintains position and creates an offensive opening. Use the iron sole of your boot. Minimal energy expenditure. Before Izuku could consciously process the thought, his leg was already moving. He snapped his foot up in a sharp, precise arc. The metal plate on his sole met the spinning knife with a sharp clang. The blade was sent careening into the brick wall beside him, where it embedded itself to the hilt. The entire exchange took less than half a second. Stain's eyes, visible through the slits of his mask, widened slightly. A flicker of genuine surprise. He had expected a clumsy dodge, a panicked flinch. He hadn't expected a calm, calculated, and perfectly executed deflection. Impressive. Stain breathed, a hint of something that might have been respect in his voice. And then he was moving. He wasn't like the Nomu, a creature of brute force. He wasn't like Gran Torino, a ricocheting comet. Stain moved with a grounded, terrifying grace. He flowed across the alley floor, his katana held low, a silver serpent ready to strike. He's closing the distance. Izuku's will was a frantic alarm bell. Keep him back. Negative, Nexus countered instantly. He is a master of mid-range combat with his blade. Forcing him back plays to his strengths, allowing him to control the engagement distance. We must close the gap. Bring this to extreme close quarters. Nullify the effective range of his sword. It was counterintuitive. It was insane. It meant rushing towards the man with the razor-sharp sword. He cut Ida to ribbons from that range. Izuku's thought was a panicked shout. Ida attempted to match him at his own game. Nexus's logic was a cold, hard anchor in the storm of Izuku's fear. He used his speed to engage and disengage, allowing Stain to dictate the flow. We will not make the same mistake. We will smother him. Trust the analysis, Ninth. Execute. Izuku clenched his jaw, his fear warring with the irrefutable logic of his internal partner. He took a breath and made his choice. He trusted Nexus. Instead of backing away, he shot forward. He dropped his center of gravity, his greenlit form a low-profile missile, and charged directly at the hero killer. The move was so unexpected that Stain's fluid advance faltered for a barest fraction of a second. That was all the opening they needed. Stain slashed with his katana, a silver arc meant to cleave Izuku in two. He favors a horizontal slash after a forward rush. Nexus's voice was a stream of pure combat data, drawn from the memories of the second and third users, men who had fought blade-wielding villains in the dark alleys of a bygone age. The attack is fast but overcommits his shoulder. Slide under it. Target his leading leg. Izuku slid on the grimy pavement, the soles of his boots scraping the ground. The katana whistled over his head, so close he could feel the stir of the air. As he passed under Stain's extended arm, he lashed out with his leg, a 5% powered kick aimed directly at Stain's knee. His foot connected, but not with flesh and bone. There was a sharp crack of metal on metal. Stain, with inhuman reflexes, had brought a heavy metal greave on his shin up to block the blow. The force of the impact sent a painful jolt up Izuku's leg, but the block also threw Stain off balance. He stumbled back a step, his eyes burning with a new, more intense fire. "You are not a brawler. You are a tactician," he hissed, recovering his stance instantly. "Who trained you?" Izuku didn't answer. He was already up, using his momentum to pivot into another attack, a sharp elbow strike aimed at Stain's sword arm. This was the dance now, a chaotic ballet of offense and defense. It was a whirlwind of internal dialogue and external action. Izuku's will, he's too fast. I can't land a clean hit. Nexus's analysis. We are not trying to land a knockout blow. We are applying pressure, forcing him to remain on the defensive, limiting his options. Watch his knives. He keeps them on his left thigh. He will use them to create space if we get too close. Stain, as if on cue, dropped his sword into a one-handed grip and his other hand darted for the knives on his thigh. Predictable, Nexus noted with cold satisfaction. Evasive maneuver, backwards somersault. Create distance, then immediately re-engage from a new angle. Izuku threw himself backwards, tucking into a perfect somersault just as two knives sliced through the air where his chest had been. He landed on his feet and immediately launched himself off the alley wall, coming at Stain from the side. This constant, unpredictable assault was having an effect. Stain was a duelist. He was used to analyzing his opponent, finding their rhythm, and dismantling them with methodical precision. But Izuku had no rhythm. He was a chaotic storm of feints, dodges, and multi-angled attacks, his every move dictated by a cold, inhuman tactical engine. Stain was being forced into a purely reactive state, unable to set up his own attacks, unable to find an opening to use his quirk. He snarled in frustration, a low, animalistic sound. He abandoned precision and opted for ferocity, his katana a blur of silver, forcing Izuku to backpedal. From the ground, Ida watched in stunned disbelief. This wasn't the Midoriya he knew. The hesitant, muttering, analytical boy from his class was gone. In his place was a warrior. His movements were precise, efficient, almost robotic, yet fueled by a desperate, heroic fire. It was like watching two completely different fighters inhabit the same body. He moved with the controlled grace of a seasoned pro, yet his eyes held the terrified, determined gaze of a boy fighting for his friend's life. As Stain's assault intensified, Nexus's perspective on the hero-killer began to crystallize, feeding into Izuku's own consciousness. It wasn't just data anymore. It was ideology. He is a symptom. Nexus's thoughts were like watching a historical documentary at high speed. This society, built on the image of the symbol of peace, has grown complacent. It produces heroes more concerned with ratings and merchandise than with sacrifice. All Might's brilliance cast a shadow so vast that mediocrity was allowed to flourish within it. Stain is the inevitable result. A self-appointed gardener, attempting to prune the diseased branches. Izuku felt a strange, chilling moment of understanding. He didn't agree with Stain's methods, but through Nexus's detached lens, he could see the twisted logic. He could see the truth buried in the madness. But his methods are flawed, Nexus concluded. He prunes the weakest branches, yes, but he poisons the soil. He fosters fear, not hope. He is a necessary evil that has outlived its purpose and must now be purged. He is an antibody that has become a disease. The philosophical debate was cut short as Stain saw an opening. Izuku, forced back for a moment, was near the fallen body of the hero native. Stain changed his target, his blade flashing towards the helpless hero. It was a test. A moral trap. Izuku's will screamed, "Protect him." He didn't hesitate. He threw himself in front of native, taking a defensive stance. It was exactly what Stain wanted. The move broke Izuku's offensive momentum and put him in a predictable, stationary position. Stain's lips twisted into a cruel smile. His tongue, unnaturally long and forked, darted out and licked the edge of his blade, cleaning a drop of native's blood from it. And just like that, Izuku's world seized up. A strange, electric jolt shot through his nervous system. His muscles locked. The vibrant hum of full cowling sputtered and died, the green energy flickering out. He tried to move, to even twitch a finger, but his body was no longer his own. He was a statue, a prisoner, in his own flesh. Paralyzed. Foolish child. Stain rasped, walking slowly towards him. A true hero must be able to make the hard choice. To sacrifice one to save many. Your sentimentality is your fatal flaw. All you fakes share it. Quirk analysis. Nexus's voice was dangerously calm, a stark contrast to Izuku's shrieking panic. Activation condition. Ingestion of target's blood. Effect. Motor function paralysis. Duration unknown, likely dependent on blood type. A highly effective assassination tool. I can't move! Izuku screamed in his mind. Nexus, do something. I am not a separate entity. 9th. I operate through your nervous system. If your nervous system is compromised, so am I. I cannot force a signal to a muscle that cannot receive it. This was it. This was how it ended. He was going to die here, in this filthy alley, because he chose to protect someone. He was going to fail Ida. He was going to fail All Might. Stain raised his katana, its tip aimed directly at Izuku's exposed neck. It is time to purge another fake from the world. Suddenly, a massive wall of fire erupted at the mouth of the alley, bathing the narrow space in a brilliant, roaring orange light. One villain after another. A familiar, detached voice called out. It's been a busy night. Shoto Todoroki stood there, his left side ablaze, his right frosting over, a vision of elemental fury. Stain shielded his eyes, forced to take a step back from the intense heat. Another one. He sighed, his tone filled with weary annoyance. Todoroki-kun! Izuku cried out, his voice strained. Relief warred with a new, sharper fear. Now his other friend was here, in the crosshairs of a killer. Todoroki didn't waste time with words. He sent a massive wave of ice surging down the alley. Stain leaped backwards with incredible agility, landing on the wall and running along it, parallel to the ground, defying gravity. Todoroki's attack gave the paralyzed heroes a moment of reprieve. He blasted another wave of fire, forcing Stain to keep his distance. Midoriya, he said, not looking at him, his eyes locked on the hero killer. I got your message. A vague location pin. You really need to work on your communication skills. His tone was calm, but Izuku could hear the undercurrent of concern. He had sent out a mass message to his contacts, a desperate, one-button cry for help before charging into the alley. He hadn't even known if it went through. Stain was now on the rooftop, looking down at them. More children, playing hero. I have no quarrel with you, he said to Todoroki. The one I was purging was him. He pointed his sword at Ida. And him, he pointed at Izuku. You I will let live. Leave now. No, Todoroki said, his voice flat and cold. You've hurt my friends. That makes you my enemy. He sent a massive spire of eyes shooting upwards. Stain dodged it easily, leaping to another building. The fight was now a long-range battle, with Todoroki trying to pin Stain down and Stain effortlessly evading, looking for an opening to close the distance again. Izuku watched, helpless, his body a useless prison. The paralysis felt like it was starting to wane, a faint tingling returning to his fingers, but it was too slow. Todoroki was powerful, but he was fighting alone against a man who had defeated multiple pro-heroes. He cannot win alone, Nexus's voice was grim. Todoroki's power is immense but lacks precision. He relies on large-scale attacks, which are ineffective against the target with Stain's agility and mastery of the terrain. The longer this fight goes on, the higher the probability that Stain will acquire a sample of his blood. They needed to do something. Now, Nexus, Izuku pleaded, his desperation a raw, open wound. There has to be a way. You have the knowledge of 8 users. Has anyone ever broken a paralysis quirk before? There was a pause. A deep, Resonant silence as Nexus sifted through more than a century of memories. The second user faced a villain with a similar ability. Nexus's voice returned, tinged with a new, dangerous idea. A neurotoxin that locked the peripheral nervous system. He survived by bypassing it. He used my raw power to create an involuntary muscle contraction. A forced spasm. It was imprecise, damaging, and risked cardiac arrest. Do it, Izuku said without a moment's hesitation. The risk is extreme. The backlash could cripple you permanently. It could stop your heart. Todoroki is fighting for us. Ida is bleeding on the ground. Izuku's will was a white-hot nova. I don't care about the risk. Do it. He felt Nexus's reluctant agreement, a feeling like a massive engine groaning to life against its better judgment. A dangerous precedent, ninth. Very well. Brace yourself. I cannot control the output with this level of interference. I can only open the floodgates for a microsecond. The destination will be your central nervous system. I will attempt to reboot it, like a lightning strike on a stalled machine. Izuku didn't have time to brace. He felt a sensation like a dam breaking inside his chest. A tidal wave of raw, untamed one for all, not the controlled 5% of full cowling, but a violent, chaotic surge of pure energy, crashed directly into his spinal column. The world exploded into white-hot agony. It was the worst pain he had ever felt, eclipsing even the feeling of his bones shattering at the sports festival. Every nerve in his body screamed at once. His back arched violently, his teeth slamming together with a crack. A strangled, inhuman cry was ripped from his throat. Green lightning, wild and untamed, erupted from his body, charring the ground beneath him. And then, as quickly as it came, it was over. He collapsed forward onto his hands and knees, gasping, his body trembling violently. His vision was a blurry tunnel, and the taste of ozone and blood filled his mouth. But he could move. He could feel his fingers digging into the grimy asphalt. The paralysis was broken. He pushed himself up, his legs shaking. The world swam back into focus just in time to see Stain land a glancing cut on Todoroki's arm. The hero killer's tongue snaked out, licking the fresh blood from his blade. Todoroki froze, his eyes wide with shock as the paralysis took hold. Now you see, Stain said, walking towards him. Your power is useless against true conviction. He didn't get another step. A green blur shot past him, and a fist slammed into his jaw. It wasn't a 100% smash. It was a perfectly controlled 5% punch, delivered with the full force of Izuku's body weight behind it. The blow snapped Stain's head back and sent him stumbling. You talk a lot about conviction, Izuku said, his voice a low growl. He stood between Stain and his two frozen friends, his body a beacon of defiant green energy. But all I see is a murderer who preys on the wounded. Nexus was back online, the connection clean and sharp after the violent reboot. Warning, vessel has sustained significant internal trauma. Nerve pathways are frayed. Continued combat is inadvisable. It's not an option, Izuku thought back, his resolve absolute. He and Stain stared at each other down the length of the alley. The dynamic had shifted again. Now it was Izuku, battered but mobile, against a fresh Stain, with two of his allies incapacitated. The odds were even worse than before, but something had changed in Izuku. The terror was still there, a cold knot in his stomach. But overriding it was a fierce, protective fire. He had felt true helplessness. He had been saved by his friend, and then he had watched that friend fall. The cycle would stop here. He knows our primary attack method now, Nexus analyzed, its voice all business. He will be wary of close-quarters combat. He will try to maintain distance and use his projectiles. We must do the opposite of what he expects. What does he expect? Izuku asked. A direct, heroic charge. An attempt to overwhelm him with your newfound mobility. So what do we do? A new, radical strategy bloomed in their shared consciousness. A plan born of desperation and the combined cunning of 9 heroes. We use them, Nexus said, referring to the paralyzed Ida and Todoroki. Not as liabilities, but as anchors. Izuku shot forward, but not at Stain. He grabbed Todoroki by the collar, the fire on his left side still burning weakly, and began to drag him back. At the same time, with his other hand, he blasted a 5% air flick towards Ida, pushing him further down the alley. Stain watched, confused. Retreating? A sound choice for a coward. Not retreating, Izuku grunted, the effort of moving Todoroki immense. He was creating a triangle, with himself at the apex and his two friends at the base corners. He was deliberately limiting his own battlefield, turning the open alley into a confined kill box of his own making. He believes our greatest asset is speed, Nexus explained. We will show him it is strategy. He is a hunter. We will turn his hunting ground into our web. Stain, seeing Izuku seemingly boxing himself in, saw his chance. He charged, katana held high, ready for the killing blow. Izuku stood his ground. He let Stain come to him. As the hero killer entered the triangle, Izuku stomped his foot. A 5% smash, not aimed at Stain, but at the ground. The asphalt buckled and cracked. At the same time, Todoroki's uncontrolled fire, fanned by the shockwave, flared up, creating a wall of flame on Stain's left. Simultaneously, the wave of air from the smash kicked up dust and debris from the other side, obscuring his vision on the right. For a split second, Stain was trapped. Boxed in by fire, dust, and rubble, his only clear path was forward, directly at Izuku. It was a perfectly executed trap. Izuku met his charge. This time, there was no finesse, no intricate dance. There was only the raw, desperate will to win. He slammed his body into Stain's, a 5% powered shoulder check that was less like a hero's attack and more like a street brawler's tackle. The impact sent them both crashing to the ground. The katana flew from Stain's hand, skittering across the pavement. They were wrestling on the grimy floor, a desperate tangle of limbs. Stain was stronger, wirier, his hands scrabbling for one of his many knives. Izuku saw it. The glint of steel. Stain had a small blade palmed, ready to plunge it into his side. Now! The command was a singular, unified roar in his mind. Izuku poured every ounce of the controlled 5% he could manage into one final, desperate move. He headbutted him. There was a sickening crack as his forehead connected with Stain's nose. The hero killer cried out, a sharp gasp of pain and shock, his head snapping back. His grip on the knife loosened. It was over. Izuku scrambled back, breathing heavily, his whole body screaming in agony. Stain lay on the ground, groaning, a hand clutched to his broken, bleeding nose. Silence descended on the alley, broken only by the ragged gasps of the three conscious participants, and the distant, approaching sirens. Ida and Todoroki were beginning to stir, the paralysis finally wearing off completely. Stain pushed himself to his elbows, his eyes burning with an unholy light. Even defeated, even bleeding on the ground, his conviction was a palpable force. He looked at Izuku, at the boy who had bested him not with overwhelming power, but with strategy, sacrifice, and brutal tenacity. He saw the fear in Izuku's eyes, the exhaustion, the pain. But beneath it, he saw something else. That flicker of ancient, unyielding will he had glimpsed before, now burning as a steady flame. It was not the hollow ambition of a fake. It was the unwavering spirit of a true protector. You! Stain breathed, a bloody smile spreading across his face. You are worthy! You are a true hero! And then his eyes rolled back in his head, and he collapsed, unconscious. Izuku stared down at the fallen villain, his body trembling uncontrollably. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind an ocean of pain from Nexus's violent reboot. He had won. They had won. They were alive. Victory confirmed. Nexus's voice was faint, strained. The vessel is critically damaged but functional. Mission complete. The partnership had been tested by fire, and it had held. They were two minds, yes, but in the heat of battle, against an enemy who was the embodiment of a lethal ideology, they had become one body, one will, one hero. And they had survived.